All right, let's back away from politics for just a second and focus on the fact that you work at Georgetown University. You're in the midst of this college situation that everyone's talking about now. We hear about trigger warnings every day and safe spaces and all of this stuff. So I'm curious, as someone that's in the thick of it, have you seen an attitude change within the student population where they really are afraid of new ideas?
I honestly haven't really seen this. I do think law schools are different than undergraduate programs, and so most of what I know about what you're talking about, I know the way you know it from reading press accounts of it, not from personal experience. I don't exactly know why. I mean, it's not that law schools are completely immune, and we do have our controversies and people can get themselves into trouble, but I just haven't seen, and students do tend to select professors on the basis of whether they like, and there may be some students who avoid taking me because they don't want to be, they don't think they want to hear from me, but that's their choice, and that's always
they can self-censor.
That's always been the case. I haven't had a problem, and I haven't seen a problem. And I haven't even heard about that many problems in law schools themselves.
Yeah.
So I think mainly because students who go to law school are usually interested in a degree by which they'll make their living. And the professors who teach in law schools usually are practicing lawyers, or they've been practicing lawyers. They have, and they're somewhat more grounded in the subjects that we teach, contracts, property torts, civil procedure, whatever it is we're teaching, there's a law there that we need to talk about. It isn't just our views of what good and bad things are.
Right, so there's sort of a literalness to it that you wouldn't be able to use a safe space for because you have to address the things that you're talking about, as opposed to like a social science or something.
Right. I mean, there were problems that when people were teaching the law of rape and criminal law as to how they would teach it, and I think we've all become more sensitive to how we express ourselves. I mean, you have to be in doing a television or a video thing, you have to be more sensitive to the way you express yourselves, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And so in some respects it's been an improvement, but as long as I think you're respectful, I haven't seen a major problem. I'm hoping that remains the same, but we'll see.
Yeah. I'm curious, right before, when we took a tiny little break here, you mentioned something about sort of the educational system in general and that we should be teaching kids a lot of these principles, probably a lot younger, so that they get to college, I think was the thrust of what you're saying, so they have some of this knowledge within them. Have you seen that change? I mean, you know, we know our education system in this country isn't that great. Have you seen, now again, you're at a law school, so they've already gone through some years of college, but just sort of the general state of education by the time they get to you, do you sense that that's changed at all?
I haven't actually even, I have to say, what I was joking about is wouldn't it be nice if we actually had a system called a educational system in which people would learn these basics.
Crazy.
But the thing is when I was a public school graduate. I graduated high school, I hate to admit this, I graduated high school in 1970. So I was in high school from 66 to 70. I didn't learn much of any of this stuff.
Nothing?
Not much. I mean, I remember specifically knowing when I became a philosophy major in college at Northwestern, and I was taking other courses, and I thought, you know what? I could have handled. Why didn't they teach me some of this in high school? I could have gotten it. They were teaching me blah blah blah, and now I'm starting to learn stuff now in college. So I do think that college is where you tend, if you're going to pick up real information, you do pick it up in college, and by the time they get to law school, they've had college. And I teach at good law schools, and I have good students to get into Georgetown have to do very well in college. And as a result, I think my students are pretty well educated. Does that mean they know everything I think they ought to know? But the truth is, I don't know everything I think I ought to know. I'm learning new stuff. I just was teaching constitutional law yesterday, and I was criticizing the casebook for getting some of the facts wrong. You know who authored the casebook?
Uh-oh.
Me. And I was saying to my students, I said, I hate casebook authors that make these stupid mistakes.
Yeah.
But it was my own casebook. I have learned stuff since I wrote that edition of the casebook that now the casebook's going to have to be corrected.
Did you figure it out while you were talking about it, or did you
know?
No, you knew before, so you were...
No, I walked into the classroom. I knew I had changed my mind, or I knew more about what I was a story I was telling about the Civil War and stuff in this casebook, and I knew more. I'd learned more about it since I did that edition of the casebook. So even I had got stuff wrong in the book.
Right. How do we make this stuff cooler? I think that's the hurdle here. is that when I've talked to a bunch of guests that I've had on, and we've talked about these ideas and liberty and individualism and free speech and all these things, that they don't seem they're not in the ether right now as cool ideas. The collective seems to be out there more, what I've been calling the oppression Olympics, that everyone wants to be part of a group that's more oppressed than some other group. But how do we get back to making some of this stuff cool? Not just so it's not just done as an intellectual exercise or an academic exercise.
You're talking to the wrong guest.
I'm asking the wrong guy for that one.
I was a nerd growing up.
Yeah.
I'm still a nerd. I'm a professor. I'm still a nerd. I'm not the guy to talk about cool.
Yeah.
Ask me stuff I know about. But being cool, that's not my thing.
Yeah.
And not something I know much about.
Yeah. But to admit you're not cool is kind of cool. You know, that's how cool this works. All right, so let's back up all the way to the beginning, because there was something I wanted to ask you right up top that we went past, which is, all right, so you love this document, the Constitution. As you said, the things that you would like to see changed could all be done within the constructs, although you're mentioning some other amendments, but they could basically be done within the constructs of the Constitution. Is there any flaw in there that you really see that we're missing, or that really is a weakness of our system?
Well, first of all, let me just say I like the Constitution. I mean, I don't know if I love the Constitution, but I like it. I mean,
Fair enough.
Okay, and that puts me ahead of most of my colleagues who don't like the Constitution. They don't like the one we've got, so they want to make a different one, right? So
is that true? Most of your colleagues?
I think that's true. That's the only reason why you'd be a living constitutionalist, is because you don't actually like the document, so you want to live your way, evolve your way out of it. So I kind of like it, but whether I love it or not is another question. Now, having corrected that, what was the rest of the question? I forgot already.
Is there a flaw in it, or some pieces that you feel like?
It hasn't actually worked out the way it was supposed to. It was supposed to be a charter of limited government. Do we have limited government now? We don't.
No, we definitely don't.
So there's something about it that hasn't worked so well, or we wouldn't be where we were. In fact, when I was a law student, I liked the Constitution as an entering law student, and I took constitutional law, and as I got to each part of the clause of the Constitution I liked, I would turn the page and I would find the Supreme Court said it doesn't mean what it's supposed to mean. And I'd turn the page and this doesn't apply and that doesn't apply. That Ninth Amendment thing I read to you, I recited to you earlier, that's a non-starter. The court doesn't pay any attention to the Ninth Amendment. So my conclusion after taking constitutional law is, if the Supreme Court doesn't care about the Constitution, why should I? So I was done with the Constitution. I went on to be a criminal prosecutor in Chicago, and when I became a law professor, I was a contracts professor, not a constitutional law professor, because in contracts, the law still matters, writing still matters. And then I got dragged into constitutional law reluctantly, and that's a long story we no longer have any time for.
Yeah.
I got dragged into it, and so now I spend almost all my time talking about the Constitution. Why? Because I think the Constitution that we have, the written Constitution, that has not been repealed, is a better form of government than the one we currently have. And
so that's the flaw in it, that it's not living up to itself, perhaps.
Yes. And so instead of arguing only for libertarian first principles, which I also believe in, and I have a book called The Structure of Liberty, which argues for, instead of just arguing for libertarian first principles, I think it's worth my time to talk about this text of the Constitution that is better, and it's not a perfectly libertarian document, but it's more libertarian than the actual government that currently we have. And so because it hasn't been repealed, I feel like I can still talk about it, and that's why I do.
Yeah, well, I have to say I thoroughly enjoyed this, and we laid out a lot of the principles and the definitions that I'm constantly talking about. So we're going to link to all your books right down below.
Terrific.
Do you have a final thought, or I think that we did pretty well here.
Now I'm going to go kick back and enjoy my afternoon in LA before I head back to DC, where I think it was supposed to be 97 degrees today.
Oh, man. I want to thank Randy Barnett for joining me today on the Rubin Report. You can check out his book, Our Republican Constitution, in the link right down below. And stay tuned for our next collaboration with Learn Liberty coming next month.